Director of Investment Analysis at Ark Invest, Tasha, was just interviewed by Herbert on Brighter with Herbert, and there was an interesting prediction made.
But this autonomy thing came later. So first, it was really Waymo that was talking about it, and a lot of the traditional automakers then kind of piled on and said, "We're going to have an autonomous car by 2019," and then, that never happened. I think a lot of them maybe won't be around in 10 years because I think it'll be really hard for the traditional autos to get there.
Tesla bears often like to say that Tesla stock is way overvalued because all of the legacy automakers put together are worth less money than Tesla stock. And Tesla doesn't make all of that many cars, but they fail to take into account that a lot of these automakers are not going to be around 10 years from now. At least that is what Ark Invest believes. And while many of them could still be around, they will be much smaller companies than they are today. And investors are not looking at how much are these companies making now, they are looking at how much money will these companies make 5 years from now, 10 years from now, for example. Volkswagen's chief financial officer said that this is their last call to save the company. As big as Volkswagen is, it may not be around 10 years from now, or if they are around, they will be smaller.
So it was kind of just over time that we realized, okay, well, actually, Tesla's, Elon kind of changed what he was saying. He started becoming more interested in autonomy, the verticalization, the software over the air updates that amazingly no other automaker is able to do across their whole model line, even today. That was, it's like more than 10 years ago at this point that Tesla's been doing this. All of those software vertical advantages is what we thought would help them in this space. So that's kind of when we just started getting sort of more confident in it over time. From that perspective.
Ark Invest completely nailed Tesla stock, and it has returned 1,200% for them as their largest position. And I would like to acknowledge that finally, if you just look at the last 5 years, Ark's main fund is no longer negative, it is positive, returning 2.75%. With inflation seriously slowing down in the US, rate hikes are likely to stop, and maybe we will even see rate cuts. That would seriously help Ark Invest, so I would not be surprised if Ark Invest's returns turn out to be really good over the next few or 5 years, let's say even. But I don't think they are going to be Tesla, so I'm staying all in Tesla.
The progress that we've seen in AI in general and with large language models, although that's not explicitly autonomous driving, you can't say that doesn't help. That doesn't help just the field of AI in general. We already know that Tesla is using transformers, which were popularized by large language models. I think all those breakthroughs kind of just give us confidence that the field itself is moving forward at a rate that would have been really hard to predict if you were to guess where it would be, 5 years ago today, type of thing.
I have been saying this pretty much from the moment ChatGPT has been released, and a lot of investors that are not really so much into AI are now catching up to it. Although while ChatGPT can pass a lot of different exams, including the bar exam and a lot of medical exams, for now, this actually describes the state of ChatGPT pretty well. ChatGPT may have better bedside manner than some doctors, but it lacks some expertise for now.
With the the general world model that they're building, that you'd be able to feed it YouTube images and even like video from your phone about driving, and that even that could be used as input, which really, Tesla's kind of crossing this threshold where, they're working on the Optimus project. Autonomous driving sets them up really well to be this company that knows how to move robots through physical space. And that's the idea of giving it sort of any type of training input is totally different than what we've heard in the past. I mean, I know we've heard that when, even with autopilot, like from, the Model S to the X, they needed to make the sensor placement pretty exact on the vehicle to get it nearly identical across the model types so that you could use the same, video feed to train the system. So, moving from that to just a random iPhone video is pretty amazing, and really suggests that this could be generalizable. If other automakers fail to achieve full autonomy, like maybe autopilot, they will license autopilot to others, as Elon has said, and I guess maybe they'll have the capability to do so, I guess, if you believe this presentation. So I was really impressed by that.
That actually goes way beyond just licensing full self-driving to other automakers that have vehicles that don't exactly look like Tesla's, meaning their sensors are in different places because the shape of a car is different, which makes it more difficult to really use Tesla's technology in their vehicles. This could actually also be used for the Tesla bot. Here's a video of how to play basketball. Now you go figure out how to play it too. This of course won't happen tomorrow, but everything is connected. But sometime in the future, you will be able to do things like feed every single basketball game that has ever been recorded to this AI model, and that then goes into the Tesla bot, and then all of a sudden Tesla bot can play a basketball game better than any person ever did. It's a bit crazy, but that's the feature that's coming.
My modeling suggests that a robotaxi could be as cheap as 25 cents a mile to the consumer. I think that there's a lot of room in between $3 and 25 cents for pricing that'll be amenable to consumers. So I don't think it has to be that low, and I don't think it will be that low upon initial release. Really, all you need to do is to undercut today's ride-hail prices, and you do that, both by taking the driver out, but also I think that these cars might have better utilization rates. Than both today's taxis and, of course, personal cars. So it could actually be cheaper than if you live in a city, it'll be cheaper to take a robotaxi than it will be to drive your personal car, because that costs you roughly like 70 cents on average per mile in the US. To drive a new personal car, at least, a little bit less for the average vehicle.
A lot of people will start using robotaxis once the cost is going to be below owning your own vehicle. However, not everyone will get rid of their own vehicles, because even if it is a lot cheaper to use a robotaxi, you still lose that convenience of not having to wait for a robotaxi and just being able to immediately get in the car and drive to wherever you have to drive. And by the way, you just have full self-driving, so you don't really need to drive, but it's your own robotaxi basically. And then it goes and parks itself, and then when you're finished with whatever you're doing, it's there immediately. You don't need to wait for even a minute. I personally like to keep a sweater in my car, because sometimes if I go someplace, let's say in the middle of the day, and then I'm out till late in the evening, it gets cold, then I have a sweater in the car. I don't need to come home to grab my sweater or carry my sweater the whole time. But economically, it won't really make sense to do that. It will be more like a nice luxury to have.
I think the main difference between Tesla competitors, as I said, is the data advantage. So Cruise and Waymo. Cruise has 2 million miles in the cumulative lifetime of the project. It might be more than that at this point, but I think that's the last announced data point that they gave. Waymo, and that's driverless miles. That's what they count. Waymo has, they call it public rider only miles. So it's not quite apples to apples, but close enough. That, I think they've announced a 1 million-mile marker so far. And then again, 250 million miles Tesla FSD beta. Is it totally apples to apples? No. I mean, you still have a driver behind the wheel, but I think it just gives you an idea of the scale and the data difference between those companies. And of course, the big difference is Tesla's doing it vision only, where these companies are using LiDAR and HD maps. I think that the HT map approach has proven itself to be first to market. And now it's a question of, well, who's first to scale? And I think that the vision only approach, which, in a lot of ways Tesla actually had to do to, get the right hardware on consumer cars on the road. But, that's how they're going to get the scale, get the data advantage to solve this on like a more generalizable scale, where maybe they could launch faster in other cities than competitors have done so far.
Also, I would like to remind everyone that GM launched its first EV in 1996, and yet GM is definitely not the biggest automaker today. Tesla is. So even though technically other companies have already launched their full self-driving solutions, they are not going to scale as quickly as Tesla later will.
So that said, you get this data advantage, you launch, you get to scale first, you're able to undercut your competitors on pricing, competitors even being ride-hail platforms at this point. Then I think it's really hard for the second company to catch up, because you're likely, whoever crossed the finish line at scale first probably has some technology advantage over you. So you're like trying to catch up on the technology front, which probably isn't cheap to do, while also kind of trying to stay competitive on price. We've seen like in the ride hail wars that can get pretty ugly. And it's like it's similar to what we're seeing to some extent happen in the electric vehicle market. Not every automaker is producing them profitably. I think it'll be hard to compete profitably with a company that gets to scale first.
So this is where I have a little bit of a disagreement with someone like Gary Black, who says, well, Tesla is not going to be the only one with full self-driving. Okay, let's assume that Gary Black's scenario comes true and everyone somehow magically immediately solves full self-driving at the same moment as Tesla will. I don't think that will happen, but let's assume it will. Okay, well, all other companies, how cheaply can they make their electric vehicles? Can anyone make EVs cheaper than Tesla? If the answer is no, does that mean that Tesla is able to charge less for its ride-sharing service or an Uber equivalent? Yes. And if you charge less money for the exact same service, why would anyone go with anyone else? With cars, you can say, oh, it's about the status. And it's about your personality. But if you're getting a robot taxi, there's just not that much personality in there. One more question that Herbert asked Tasha was, do you agree with a point of view that if full self-driving was indeed dangerous and terrible, that NHTSA would be stepping in and basically banning full self-driving or giving Tesla a very difficult time? In other words, this proves that indeed full self-driving in its current form is relatively safe, because NHTSA is not making it terribly difficult for Tesla. This was her response.
So I do agree with that point of view.
The answer was a bit longer, but that video was 1 hour long. Tasha also says that she thinks that full self-driving is going to first be sold in the US and not in China, because in China, testing is restricted to specific business zones and cities. But in the US, for example, if you are approved in California, she says you can go basically everywhere in California. And that way you get a lot more data in many different situations. Tasha also thinks that it will be much easier for Tesla to deal with regulators compared to any other company, because Tesla has the most vehicles on the road that do have full self-driving capability. Right now, of course, it's in beta, but you can see all of the data, how many accidents on full self-driving happen, how many interventions, etc., etc., etc. The data is much, much bigger. If you only have, let's say, 1 million of miles in total, how do you know that indeed you only have, let's say, one accident every 1 million miles? But if you have a billion miles of data, let's say, then yeah, if your data says you only have one accident per 1 million miles or one accident per 10 million miles, yeah, I think we will be a lot more likely to believe you. So she thinks that regulation is not going to be that big of a problem. YouTube says you should watch this video next, but if you haven't finished watching this Elon Musk interview, watch this one first. My name is Matt Posius. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.